traditionally start today's presentation by introducing our presenter to you. Now you'll notice that there's a list of recent awards on the bottom, and I just wanted to include those because I didn't want to read them from the bio. So while I'm telling you more about James, please listen to me for a moment about who he is. Dr. James May is a professor of English as a second language at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. James specializes in computer-assisted language learning, CALL, and enjoys all things digital, as you will see when he gives his presentation. He's also currently working as Valencia's faculty fellow for innovation and technology, where he is leading a new faculty development initiative known as Circles of Innovation. This open source faculty-driven model will be launched nationally at NISOD later this year, actually at the end of next month, Memorial Day weekend. James also blogs about technologies for the classroom at his teachertricks.org website, and you will get an email at the end of today's session with a bunch of information, and one of them will be a link to his website. And as you can see, he has recently received many awards, and there's just a brief list available on that slide. So having said that, I'm going to turn this over to James, and you can show them the work that you are doing. Take it away, James. I can see your screen, but I cannot hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your afternoon or late evening, from what I understand from some people around the world, and joining us for this presentation. And so let's go ahead and take a look. We're going to talk about flipping the classroom today, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the brain research and different things that are behind why a flipped classroom model is a great model, especially for teaching millennials. As I'm presenting, if you have questions, Stephen, can they type in their questions to you? Are you guys going to moderate that?
Yes, exactly. And
okay,
we will interrupt you if there's a question that really needs clarification. Otherwise, we'll just wait till the end.
Sounds great. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started then. We're going to start by building a little background on talking about our students. Students today, I think a lot of us would agree, are a little bit different. They've grown up in a different world, and so let's talk a little bit about them. I hear a lot from faculty that they don't read and they don't write, they don't do certain things. The truth behind it is actually teens today, teenage students in the high schools, young community college students, this teen group is actually writing more than any generation before them. They're texting and receiving text of about 110 texts per day. And if you do the math on that, at 5 words of text, that's 275 words a day. At 10 words of text, that's 550 words a day being typed. And that's every day. That's all month long, reading and writing 1 to 2 pages every day. That's a lot more writing than I did when I was in college. But that doesn't include what they're doing on Facebook. They're also interacting, in addition to the text, with Facebook. And of course, many of us are Facebook users, and we know that there are billions of users now. It's an amazing amount of content. But this same millennial generation, this group that we're seeing in our classrooms, they've grown up in a world with TVs. When I was younger, I was the remote control for the TV, and I remember there being 3 channels. Today's kids grow up with an average of about 120 channels and DVRs, and so they're used to having content on demand, when they want it, how they want it, and streamed through whatever medium they want it. They are YouTube users. I love this statistic from YouTube where there is 72 hours of video uploaded every minute of every day to YouTube, and 3 of those hours are coming from mobile devices, and that's every day. And so there's so much content out there that can be curated and used in the classroom. It's amazing, and the students are used to watching it. They just grew up in a world where that's what their reality is. Mobile devices have become ubiquitous. They are everywhere. You can't. It's very interesting to see how students are using them. You almost can't get a phone anymore without the technology. I've tried. We've tried to get phones for my grandfather and tried to get phones that are flip phones or that are easy to use, and it's almost impossible not to get a plan where you're connected. We've created essentially a nexus and a connection where everybody's used to having data on demand when they want it. In the classroom, students bring their phones. They have them. Now, not all teachers are allowing the use of the phones, but one of the great things about SoftChalk is the content that's developed can be used on the phones. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later when we talk about transactive learning. But students have their phones in class, and they're used to using them. They may not be as good at using a desktop, but they're very good at using certain phones. And learning through phones is something that may need to be talked about in terms of learning. Of course, the pad devices, different types of iPads and the Android pads and the different types of technologies are taking over the market. By the middle of this year, laptops will be no longer the big beast. It'll be the pad technologies. They're going to surpass sales. And so I would imagine a future in the classroom where all students are coming in, which is another great thing for SoftChalk because it's content module development. You're curating content and putting it together in a way that you can use it before class, during class, and after class, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But before I do that, I want to show a quote. And I'm going to give you a second to read this. I'll actually read it to you, but I want you to think about who said this. In 10 years, books will be obsolete. Students will learn through the eye. Every field of scientific endeavor can be taught through video. Now, I guess you guys can feel free to type your answers in, Stephen. If they got some good ones, you can read them. But this actually was said by, believe it or not, Thomas Alva Edison 100 years ago. This came out in the New York Dramatic Mirror in July of 1913, which is almost 100 years ago now. And it says that books will be obsolete. Now, you may remember that he invented the motion picture. He assumed that the motion picture would be used over traditional classroom practices. It's been 100 years, and YouTube's done a lot, but it's still not really taking over the way he thought it might have and the way some others thought that it might have. But there's a lot of content out there to be curated and used for instruction. I love to use this image when I talk to teachers, mainly because it's a 14th century image. And just about every campus that I could go on to today has a classroom that looks just like this 14th century model. Even though the motion picture was invented 100 years ago, even though there are 72 hours of video footage uploaded to YouTube every minute of every day, classrooms still look like this. And that's an interesting point. Should they look like this? Should they be designed like this? Should students be interacting with content in the way that we give it to them? Students, of course, have their cell phones out in class. If you look at this picture, it's kind of funny because this student is so busy texting in class that she didn't even have time to finish her crossword puzzle. And some of us have experienced this. And of course, we put blame on students. We put blames in different area. But this is where you've got a population, a generation of students that expects content on demand. They expect curated video and audio and text. They've just grown up with it. That's one of the reasons why a flipped model is a great model for teaching. So let's take a look at some brain rules. Another thing I said I'd talk about today is the brain. And in my field, which happens to be linguistics and second language learning, psycholinguistics and brain research has really blown up in the last decade. Actually, more than the last decade, last 15 years. There's a great book, which I'm going to be quoting from here a little bit today, by a guy named John Medina, who goes out and compiled a bunch of research to put together almost a user-friendly for teachers and anyone a way of looking at the rules of the brain. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them right here. One of them is called, one of the concepts is sensory integration. And looking at this, and again, this is John Medina's book. You can go to his website. It's brainrules.net, I believe it is. But when it comes to remembering content after 14 days, if you read it, you're looking at a small percentage. Hearing it only, small percentage. When you see things and you combine seeing with hearing, you notice the percentages go up. Well, this is interesting because with all that curated content and with a generation of students that's used to watching videos and hearing things and watching them, this means that we can take advantage of that and use that with our students in a flipped classroom. But if you look at this, this is another aspect on sensory integration. The simulations and the real doing things, of course, the hands-on, that's where they get a lot of benefit. And we have a tendency, or in the traditional model, to send students home to get their hands-on experience, where they're not really moderated by teachers, where they don't have access to a teacher to actually jump in and say, here's what's going wrong, and troubleshoot and model best practices. And so if we flip that, on the other hand, we can use that curated content at home, where we can take advantage of the seeing and the hearing, and then in class, we can take advantage of the simulated real experiences and give them that learning that's going to stay with them based on brain research. Now, another thing that we know about brain research is the 10-minute rule. 10-minute rule essentially means that you have about 10 minutes before your attention span starts to wane. So I guess I should do something here to really get your attention back. But I'm showing this chart of it's reported elapsed attention. I've seen other studies that show that the millennials actually have a shorter attention span, moving towards 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I'm sure some of you have seen that research as well. But what happens is attention span is short. So how in the classroom and how online do you keep an attention span, or use their their Facebook need to flip from image to video to text? If you're using a flipped classroom model, you can curate that content and put it online for them to do as homework, and then in class take advantage of that. And so let's take a look at the next brain rule. The next brain rule, of course, is chunking. And chunking has to do with memory. It has to do with how information goes into your brain. One of the nice things as teachers, as we want to design, is we can design content and chunk it out. We have a tendency in memory. Some of us will remember the studies on 7 plus or minus 2, where we can only hold about 7 digits in our brains, and then we start to lose things, plus or minus 2 numbers. And so when we have phone numbers, you'll notice our phone numbers have 7 digits in them, and then area codes are, of course, a chunk. And so you remember the chunks. You remember the first 3 digits. You remember the second 3 digits, because you can actually remember 7 chunks of information as well. Well, that's important when you start to display content. I love showing this image of just jumbled letters and then showing it again chunked. There's definite relief just by adding color. It makes one more salient than another. And so in design and in other principles, which I'm not going to go in here today, you have to think about how you chunk content. And of course, SoftChalk has tools that allow you to chunk content, and I'll set things up for my students. Repetition is also a key in terms of brain rules, in terms of you need to repeat things. It's just what we do. We all know that when we're learning things, we need repetition. But in a flipped model, one of the nice features is you can introduce and spiral concepts throughout a lesson. And so at home, they watch something, and they get introduced to a topic. You repeat it in class with hands-on, and they're seeing and interacting with the same content. When they leave and go home, there's a third part of the SoftChalk module or of your assignment that brings it back. And so you're getting them 3 or 4 instances with content to increase their brain's capacity to hold on to things. Another really big thing is we tend to learn better from pictures than we do from anything else. We are very visual and our brains process information. When you have visual and oral information being processed at the same time, you're up to 6 times. You have 6 times better recall on that information. The brain science research looking at this is very interesting, and of course it stands to reason if you want to enhance memory, you can embed images, embed pictures as you're teaching things into modules so students can look at them at home, look at them again in class, and then review them as quiz handouts, and that can all be done through one module. And so these are the brain rules. Sensory integration, making sure you're using video and sound, make sure you're not giving long presentations in terms of, I've seen some PowerPoint presentations that are narrated and take 45 minutes to view. My personal recommendations, of course, are to chunk that out and to make it into smaller 5 to 7 minute interactive sessions that as you move through a module, you do multiple things, but they're short, chunked items that where you repeat and use pictures. Now, that's a little bit about brain rules, but I want to talk one more thing about the brain. Earlier, I mentioned transactive memory, and some of you may be familiar with this research. It actually comes from Wagner, and we all use transactive memory. Our phones currently transact a lot of memory for us. We don't remember our phone numbers anymore. We let our phones hold our phone numbers. We don't remember people's emails. We let our phones remember people's emails. In husband and wife teams, oftentimes the husband will be responsible for remembering certain things in a household, and the wife is responsible for remembering other things in the household. The same thing works on the job. I happen to be tech guy here, and so my colleagues turn to me for technology, but if I need something, I turn to them for other things. We know who remembers what, and we transact those memories as opposed to having to hold them ourselves. Well, students today know this. They live in a world where all information is transacted, and we're moving towards a world later on this year. Google Glass will be launching itself, where students will have heads-up displays with everything in a computer right at their eye whenever they want it, and all they'll have to do is ask for it. And so any facts or information they can ask for. Well, as we design flipped classroom content, we could take advantage of this and teach students how to use their transactive memory, because we could show them content at home, use the same module in class as an activity-based, and then follow through with a module that's all part of one transactive memory source. And if you put it out in the cloud, or you put it out somewhere where it's always accessible, students know where to search for it and where to find it. They know where that memory is. I don't need to remember all the details if I know where the memory is. That's what transactive memory is. So I, early in the semester, do a presentation on using Google operators. I have a tendency to search for things using Google and Google operators. For example, if I want to search for something inside of the Valencia website, rather than using the little tab to search inside of the Valencia website on the Valencia website, I'll go to Google and I'll type in site : and then Valencia College. This tells Google only search Valencia College for that information, and so I can use that. I can also, because I teach writing, if I want to work on, say, fragments or run-ons, I can do this file type and then ask for a PDF, and Google will only search for PDF. Well, I teach this stuff early in the semester, but I'm constantly reminding them throughout the semester as I'm having them do researches and other things, and this information and the handouts is transactive to them. They have access to this module all the time. It's in their phones. They just click on it. How did James do that? And they got it. And so they can go to it a couple of times, and eventually they'll start using it. They'll get that repetition, which brings back in the brain theory, and next thing you know, they're using it and they're searching like master Google operators. Now, in the title, and I think the title brought a lot of people to this presentation today, talked a little bit about Bloom's taxonomy. And of course, a lot of you remember Bloom's taxonomy. I think it's interesting how we always talk about the cognitive aspects of Bloom's taxonomy and tend to forget the psychomotor and affective domains. But let's talk specifically about the cognitive with regards to the flipped classroom model. Some of you have seen different models. I happen to like this one for when I'm developing content. And again, this is a Google search away, but it shows products and activities and different things. But since we're doing a flipped classroom, let's go ahead and flip Bloom's taxonomy. And so rather than looking at the traditional taxonomy, let's flip it. Remembering and understanding are things that students can do at home through curated content. You can go out and grab great videos from the Discovery Channel, great articles from from various sources. You have, again, all of the content that's up on YouTube, TeacherTube. There are so many sources. You could even just go to Google and type in great flipped content for, and then look for whatever area you want to find. And there's amazing flipped content. We're all it's almost like a Wikipedia world where we're all developing it, and it's all being stored in the cloud. And in a lot of cases, you're allowed to share it and utilize it. If it's not in a certain way locked down, and as long as you're not copying it and storing it on your own servers. Of course, that discussion of copyrights is out of the purview of this particular presentation, but there's a lot of amazing content that can be curated and put together for students to use before class. During class is when you actually get to apply and put your hands on. And so later on, I'll be showing you an example of basically a before class activity that students would do. And then when they come into class, I still use the same module to get them into the applying and analyzing phase. And then after class, that's when I would assess them on their ability to evaluate or their ability to create something. And so I would apply Bloom's taxonomy to the flipped model in the sense that this base stuff can be done at home. It doesn't need to happen in the classroom. It's the applied stuff. It's the analyzing where you as an instructor, as an expert, can model best practices. That's what can be done in the classroom. And that, in my opinion, is what should be done in the classroom. The remembering and watching, that can be done at home. And the flipped model allows for that. again, I was telling you that there's a lot of content out there, and it's a Google click away. 100 incredible science lectures for the flipped classroom. For those of you who are not familiar with TED Ed, I happen to get to do some work on an endowed chair this year, which interestingly enough, I'll be presenting on at NISOD. I had 15 professors working for me or with me to develop free open source content around TED videos that students can use in reading and writing classrooms. And what essentially happens is students watch videos, that leads to prompts and reading type exercises, and the videos come from TED. TED Ed is designed specifically for flipped content. Of course, you have the arts and business and health and literature, and what they've done is they've paired master speakers with graphic design artists who will animate the talks. And so you have specific, who is, early forensics, or you have networking, you have any topics in math or other things that you're looking for, and they animate them in a fun way that millennials will enjoy. One of the nice things also about TED, which I'll show you later, is that TED Talks, because of the translate feature, all of the transcripts for TED Talks are available, and so ADA compliance and adding transcripts to things is a lot easier than it would be using some other sources. So let's now talk a little bit about another one of the things I previewed in the talk. Many of you have heard of the 7 principles of good practice in undergraduate education. And so I put them here because I like to talk about each one briefly, one-on-one, and then I'm going to take you and show you a module, and hopefully you'll get to see what it is I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and how others can do this to take advantage of the brain rules and other stuff. But let's go ahead and look at this quickly. Encourage contact between students and faculty. Interaction between my students and myself, I want to increase that as much as I can. Some of the awards that I've won recently in terms of technology have to do with me using different technologies to increase that communication. I did a presentation called Cell Phones in the Classroom, Collaborative or Calamitous, and my research has led me to believe that cell phones are much more collaborative than they are calamitous. They can be used as clicker systems. They can be used in a variety of different ways to get students to actually interact with faculty. Of course, faculty development needs to come with that, but it allows for contact. And if you design a module in SoftChalk where curated content is being watched by students at home, you can embed surveys. You can embed different tools from different surveying companies that are just Web 2.0 applications to actually increase that amount of contact between you and students. So when students walk in, you're talking about something they said online, almost as if you were Facebook buddies, but it's not really that. It's through the content of the class. And they come in and they're like, wow, this teacher's engaged. He's listening to me. They know, and it changes the dynamic. The flipped model allows for that. Developing cooperation among students. I have a tendency, and actually I have a tendency to use my students to develop content. I will assign them to be curators. And so you'll see later in the lesson that rather than me developing content, which I already have, I charge them with developing content, because some of the best content I've found for teaching and using to motivate students actually come from the students. But the bigger buy-in, again, is that contact between me and them with the development and the cooperation between each other. And so you put them in teams, you let them work together to solve problems and curate content, and I've had some amazing results with that. The flipped model also takes advantage of active learning, because in the classroom you are actively engaged in a problem-solving activity. Rather than lecturing to them and having them sit passively and acquire information, they do the passive watching at home. And in the classroom, they actually get hands-on, active learning with you as the expert walking around the classroom, mentoring them in best practices. And if there are authentic questions that get asked, you as the expert can authentically problem solve in front of them and model best practices for finding answers. And in a transactive world where answers are all over, they need to watch you. They need to watch the experts to find information and how we find information in our fields. Giving prompt feedback. Again, the way I use SoftChalk, I'll use embedded quizzes and embedded forms to allow for students to type things in immediately so that I can be right there with them giving them feedback in live time. These are called, some of you heard of them as back channels. I've done presentations in the past on back channeling, but you can use these back channeling apps or different tools to give feedback immediately in live time with students, and they can be embedded inside of SoftChalk modules. You can emphasize time on task. Of course, that's obvious because in the classroom, you're not teaching the basics. The basics, they watched at home. They come to class to focus on solving the problems, getting the hands-on, the active learning. This communicates high expectations. A flipped classroom does communicate high expectations, especially if you are going to assign them to curate content, assign them to do stuff. You're assuming that they're going to do what is assigned to them. You're letting them know that they're adults and they need to take part in the class, and you're expecting high expectations from them. And of course, by using a flipped model, you're embedding video, you're embedding audio, you're embedding text, you're embedding a variety of different mediums, and you're respecting different ways of learning. The traditional classroom format, where you have students read a textbook and they come in and listen to the lecture, does not necessarily respect diverse talents in learning. Whereas if they're at home, they can choose the avenues they go to identify and learn content. And so I would argue that the 7 principles of good practice fit very well with a flipped classroom. And so let's take a look at a flipped classroom demo. Now, if you have a device like a smart pad or a phone, you can pull up this, this content. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and show you guys how I would do that right now. What I'll do is I'll mirror my device to this computer. And what you're going to see, oh, there it is. What you're looking at now is my phone. That's actually my phone in live time. Stephen, is that coming through okay?
Yes, it is. It looks great.
Okay. Okay, so that's actually my phone. Now, this is a QR code, and I use this with students all the time. I'll embed a QR code in a lesson, or I'll embed a QR code somewhere. And what a student does is they open up, I happen to use, because I have an iOS device, I use the Enigma application, which is a great QR code reader, and you'll see how quickly this happens. I basically click on it. It opens up, turns on a picture, takes a picture of that code that fast, and boom, I'm at SoftChalk Cloud, because that code was designed to take me to SoftChalk Cloud. More specifically, that code was designed to take me to the demo model, the demo class that I was going to show you. Now, you may remember from my earlier explanation that I will use content before class and content after class. And so here what I have is a video. I have a link to the video for them. I tell you what, for size reasons, there's also an assignment here that's, as I've mentioned, an interactive survey that they're going to take part in. Let me go ahead and you guys now see how the phone worked. I will kill this phone and get back to using a regular presentation model. If you want to join us, you can go to deliver.com/266GQ. You can actually log into this model with us. That is the location. If you'd like to open another window and see that to play around, you can join us, or you can join us on your smart devices. But what I want to show you is not that site, I'm sorry, is this site. Okay. And so let's go back to page 1. And so out of class, what students would have is essentially this curated content that I've curated for them. It's a video. This happens to be a spoken word poem that I heard at TED this year. I had the honor of being able to go to TED this year. It was amazing. And this particular poet put together this amazing poem on bullying, and he crowdsourced the content development in a way where graphic designers from all over the world put together this video. And it's a great video. It's a very powerful video on bullying. What I have students do is at home, they would watch this content. At home, they would log in, let me know who they were, let me know their initial impressions on the video. They would come in. I've given them, because in this particular class, we're working on in-text citation and how to cite things in text and how to attribute to an author. And so I have them identify what statistics they thought are the most, I guess, startling or need to be surprising because we're going to actually do hands-on in class with in-text citation. They're going to write a paper, and then they're going to do this in-text citation in class, and I'm going to teach them how to do that. But I also assign them to go out and curate some content for class. And so they're assigned to go out and find either local articles on bullying, videos on bullying, graphic organizers on bullying, whatever they can find on bullying, and paste the links here. Now what this allows me to do is it allows me to have a spreadsheet. If you've never used a Google Doc, it allows me to have a spreadsheet of all the content they've curated. So when we come to class, I can look at it in advance. I can make comments to them as they're walking through the door. They feel engaged by the instructor. They're like, wow, this guy's really paying attention to what we're doing. And so we're setting those high expectations like we talked about from Chickering and Gamson, where we're interacting with them, we're creating a high level of interaction and engagement, and we're setting the standards for them to be the experts, them to search. Now, if you notice here, handouts. I talked earlier about transactive memory. My students are English as a second language students, and so I might recommend to them to, while they listen to this, also have the transcript. Now, the transcript for this particular talk, of course, I was able to get from TED. And so here's the transcript, and I can pull this out to the side here, of what this person is saying. And so as they watch the video, they can be reading the language. And students, I show them how to do this, and I show them that they can have this content. Now, of course, if they have their phones, they will have this transcript with them in class. The bullying statistics that I have in this particular quiz, again, is another handout. Earlier in a previous class, I had talked about citation, and they have the handout from that citation. In other words, they know where the information is, they have it, and when they leave my class at the end of the semester, they still have access to this information. So next semester when they're in Comp 1, they can also go back and see my citation. They have it permanently. It's their information. So this all would happen before they come to class. This is the curated content that happens before class. And then in class, what would happen is I would start maybe a discussion around some information graphics. Of course, again, they can see these on their devices, and they have these, and we can talk about where do these statistics come from. We can talk about different things with regards to bullying, but because the way you can embed links, I can actually have my students bring this SoftChalk module with them into class on their phones. They can then click on these particular group exercises, and I tell you what, let me bring up my phone one more time just to show you this, so that students can interact in class. Okay, there's the assignment, right? And so the students are interacting with the assignment in class. They have it on their phone, and they see everything because, again, they can have it before class, they can have it during class, and I put them into groups, and I say, okay, in your group, I want you to write me a paper using in-text and end-of-text citations. Well, they can actually edit these in-text citations right on the fly. As a matter of fact, I'll do it right now. This is a test. I am writing this just to show how easy it is to type in Google Docs. Okay, and done. And so it's actually trying to synchronize. Let me see if I can synchronize that. And what happens is, there we go, having a little trouble talking. But what's happening is that if it's synced properly, oh, it's asking me to sign in right now, which it shouldn't be, so something weird is going on. Let me close that out. Nothing like showing things and then not working. But students can take out their laptops and take out others. I see some of you who are actually joining us here online. And what this is a shared document. Now, my students can work on this. And what they can do is, what I can do is actually see them. And so if I want to go into group 3 and see who's working in group 3, I can give immediate feedback from within that document to the students working there. And so if they're working on an in-text citation, say a parenthetical citation, I can talk to them about that. If they're doing an attribute, you know, I don't know, let's see, I'll say my name again. What's going on, how they're doing attributes and what they're doing, I can talk to them live time, hands-on. I can walk around the classroom. I can see what they're writing. And in the classroom, we work on hands-on stuff rather than showing stuff at home. Or rather than having them do this at home, I do it in class so I can be right there to help them with this content. They can interact and work with it. They can share on these documents. And a nice thing, of course, when they go home, when they leave the classroom and go home and go on to stage 3, and now stage 3 is not in this SoftChalk module. Stage 3 would be an assignment online where they have to write an essay for me. They still have access to all of this transacted information. In other words, they have access to the actual video. They have access to the transcript of the video. They have access to the statistics. In the statistics handout, I gave them the actual statistics and the citations because I don't want them working on that part yet. We're just working on other things. They can use this, and they can use their notes. They can use their notes to interact, and it can all be run through this master layer that is LTI compliant and works with my classroom, so it's great. I put this up here for you guys to see today. But that is an example of flipped content. How am I doing on time, Stephen?
Let's see. I'd say no more than 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm pretty much at this point done with giving a demo of this. I'd like to open up to questions if that's possible, Stephen, because
there's lots of questions, and
okay.
And some of them, I mean, you know, if there was an audio when you brought your phone up, there would have been audible gasps, and people want to know what you did, how'd you do that? So, you know, a little bit more of an explanation about the technology of showing your phone on your screen.
Absolutely. I tend to joke about that. I probably shouldn't in a presentation like this. I joke about us having unicorns here at, you know, that sprinkle magic dust on us. But what it is there's a technology. There's a technology out there for both Mac and PC devices called Reflector. And so I'll show you that real quick. And so the Reflector is basically, it's a mirroring technology. And you can download a technology that will mirror your iOS devices to your Mac or to your PC.
Wow.
And so what that means is that you take out your iPad or you take out your iPhone, and as long as you have the content installed, and as long as both the phone and the computer are on the same network, in other words, they're using the same wireless network so they see each other, you can take whatever's on your phone and shoot it to your computer. I've been doing this in the classroom for a while now, and I tend to get the same exact looks that are what you're talking about, Stephen. I was presenting the other day on TED, and people just, they wanted to talk about Reflector. But what Reflector does also is once the content's here, you can then do screen recordings and make little lessons for students and do a lot of things. And so this is what's called Reflector. It's just a device mirroring, and it's nice because when I go to class, I just can walk in with my phone or my iPad, and I can take over and present in Prezi from my iPad right on the wall wirelessly. It's an amazing time. And so it's great. Students who have iOS devices can also take over the screen if you let them. So it's definitely kind of
people want to know if you know if they're available for Android devices, but you don't have to do that, so you may not know about that.
Yeah, I don't use Android devices, and although, you know, it's funny, we've actually played with that. There are apps that were designed. I've got a couple of colleagues here at the college where we've actually played and used Android phones to mirror content. It's not. I have not seen it or used it in the same way as this is used. This is easy and ready to go, and you saw how seamlessly it works. I have not seen the same for Android devices yet. There are supposed to be some for PC and other devices that allow for this, but I just haven't seen them to the point where I'm recommending them yet to other teachers.
Okay,
they will be here soon.
At this point, let's ask, there's some questions about technology you use, but I will intermingle them in because there's a couple questions which have regularly come up in this whole series about flipping the classroom, and that is, how do you motivate students to do their homework and be prepared to do the more interactive work in class?
Okay, so let's take a look here. First of all, one of the keys to having students be excited about doing stuff in class, or doing the homework, the pre-part of the class, is to curate great content. If the flipped class, I've seen this done and I've experienced it. If you flip your classroom and you take a lecture that was done, let's say, in class with PowerPoint, and you record an hour long of that lecture and put that on at home as the content, students will follow the brain rule. They'll follow what they're used to. They're used to Facebook. Remember, they're used to seeing a video and then moving to something else. That's what they're used to. That's what they want. And so if you curate your content in 7 to 10 minute activities where they watch something and then they go to questions and then you're assigning them to leave this particular website and go out and do a Google search to find something, I've found that I don't have to ask my students to do this. They want to do it. They look forward to doing it. I, of course, one of the key things is, from a teaching and classroom management perspective, is to make sure when you are assigning them things that you have a measure here so that they know they're being watched. That big brother effect, they know by putting their name in here that I'll know whether or not they've done the assignment before they come into class. And there was just an interesting article on that. I can't remember where it was on using ebooks, because teachers know that you've read the ebook. But if they've interacted with this content, they know that I'm looking. And the way they know they're looking is because I'm standing in the classroom when they come into class, and I'm talking to them about some of the things they said. Now, it's not every student every time, but students who are reluctant to participate, if you engage them with something they said, they feel like they're contributing. And that sense of connection, which again goes back to Chickering and Gamson, that sense of connection is what changes the game in the classroom. Then you don't have to assign the work. They'll want to do it, especially if you make them the curators. I hope that made sense to people.
Right. So some questions about how much time outside of class you end up having to commit to the students. How much time are you spending outside the classroom with the students based upon this new model?
Well, I guess that depends on how, if the content is designed, what I've done and what I would recommend is you can't just jump into a flipped model. You have to begin to curate your content over time. And so what I started years ago doing was making one assignment. And then when that assignment worked, I tweaked and made a second assignment. And as I saw cool things, I brought them in and I made different assignments. Now I've got a variety of assignments where this part of the assignment, the curated content, is done. I don't have to do a lot with this. They're going to interact with this Google document, and I tell you what, let's go ahead and see if anybody has actually interacted with that Google document. Nope, that's Circles of Innovation. We don't want to show that. Let's go to Google, and we'll go to my Drive, and oh, how did I get logged out?
While you're logging in, question about how you created the slideshow. You obviously were not in PowerPoint.
I was using Prezi.
Yeah, and people are asking whether they can have access to the Prezi presentation. Is there?
Yes, actually, I will be posting. I'll be happily share this Prezi presentation with everybody. I'll be posting it to my teachertricks.org blog, and it'll probably also be sent to the Circles of Innovation .org blog, which is going to join, like I said, I mentioned earlier, later on this year, the Circles of Innovation is a new FacDev where we're kind of using the same kind of flipped model for faculty development. Where is
everybody will get an email tomorrow with the teachertricks.org website link to it, so you'll be able to get this Prezi presentation by linking there.
Okay, absolutely. Update now. Okay, that looks good. Let me go in. All right, so let me go in. Okay, so we got the different bullying teams, and then we got we have the survey. Let me show you how the survey works. Basically, in Google Docs, you can go in and make a form. You make a survey that you want to ask your students. You guys all saw the survey, right? And then what happens is that the students fill out the survey, and I don't know if anybody has filled out the survey. It fills into a spreadsheet. Now, what I'll do is before class, and this is the investment part of that question that was being asked before. Before class, what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll say, show me the summary of responses, okay? And so now I see a summary of what my students were saying. And so I can see, oh, wow, they all really liked this one. And so as they walk through the door, I can look at what their comments were. I can look at who responded and what kind of links were shared. and I can be talking to them about the things that they were sharing. What I've found is that in doing so, you create that natural connection between you and your students. If you assign something and then don't talk about it, the students are like, well, why did we have to do that? It doesn't make, and so there's no natural connection. Whereas if I engage them with it, especially the ones that I'm worried about not paying attention, there's a little behavioral economics going on there. You're kind of Jedi mind tricking them into being excited about content. It's a teacher trick, but it is it tends to work in terms of motivating students to want to be part of things. Again, curated content is another key. You've got to have really great content, and that's why I would recommend. Let me go ahead and take you real quick to TED.com because I can show you guys, depending on your field and what you're interested in. I show my students this, and they curate their own content of what they want to talk about. You can go in and say, look, I have 5 minutes, and I want to see something that is ingenious, and TED will bring up talks that just are amazing. You can also go through and say, look, I want to view all the tags, and say I'm a math teacher or I'm a history teacher. I can go in and look at all the TED Talks on history or all the TED Talks on math, and I can curate this content. But TED Ed, again, is another place where you can go in and find the flipped content by subject. And so I happen to be, let's go ahead and click on psychology, and you can go in and find flipped content that's already curated for the classroom. It's a matter of finding it and bringing it in and tying it to what you're teaching them, and then allowing them to go out and find more related to what you're teaching them and making them searchers of content. And then I find I don't have problems with students and homework.
Well, so we only have time for one more question, and that, there's so many, and so we'll have to get back to some folks afterwards. Is there an optimal class size? There a class size that is too big for a flipped classroom in terms of being an effective educator?
That's interesting. I've heard and read different things. One of the neat things that as I've read about flipped content is the fact that, and again, it depends on what school you're at. If you go to some of the the Ivy League schools and you put your flipped content out there, those students will absorb that content and come into class. And if you're doing the same show as what you had up online, they're wanting something new. And so students actually get upset. It's like, wait a minute, we already seen this. We want something new. And that's where these MOOCs are coming in and a lot of other new technologies are coming in. I believe that using really well-curated content and having students become curators of their own learning and modeling the practices for how to find good content and use good content and tie it to what they're learning, size is not necessarily a problem. It is a problem, though, if you on the interactive basis, and that's where you have to mitigate that or kind of I would use technologies to make that happen. There are applications now that are back-channeling applications, and I guess I'll show you this. Understoodit.com. You can all go to understoodit.com/Professor May. And so it's understoodit.com/Professor May. And as those of you are starting to trickle into this website, if I say something that you understand, what you can do, I see 3 students in there. Go ahead and click on Understood. And what you're noticing is the students are going to show that they understood. But if I start talking about things that people don't understand, what happens is this will reset in about 5 to 10 seconds. And then students can click on the Confused button. And what will happen is you can actually get live-time back-channeling feedback from your students in the classroom. And so even when you have 100 or 200 people in an audience, if you have a computer up and you have an account, again, this is a free account, and this website can be embedded, and you can do different things with it. But then you have a natural way to track whether students are understanding the content, how they're interacting, and because it's a binary, you can actually ask questions about the content, and you can embed anything that's on the web can be embedded. There are tricks that are involved with that, but there are things that happen, and one of the great things about a flipped content is even when the numbers are large, there are always technologies and tricks that can be used to enhance that, and they can be put inside of the content vehicle. And I'm losing it here. Did I not keep it up? I guess I got rid of the my flipped. Let me go to SoftChalk Cloud. Actually, I'll stay here because we're running out of time. But you can.
Yeah, we are about out of time.
We're out of time. But again, you can run it through SoftChalk and have these different things there available to you to interact with.
Okay,
I hope that answers the question.
There's a bunch of questions about the various technologies, and somebody suggested we just basically need to do another webinar with you about all the tricks of the trade you have. But I think one of the things to encourage them is to go to teachertricks.org and check them out. Check that out regularly.
Absolutely. The concept again. The concept of these tricks. There are teachers all over the U.S. doing different things in the classroom, and there are teachers, charging to learn about these, and there are others who are kind of open source like me that are just kind of saying, here's a trick. If you want to use it, learn about it, and sharing that stuff in almost like a Wikipedia fashion. And so there are more and more in terms of faculty development for how to use all this content. I'm happy to share. Come see me at NISOD. Come talk to me at NISOD. I'm happy to share ideas.
Right. I learned that first time we met at NISOD several years ago.
Yeah, this particular website, which is currently under construction, it's not really ready to go yet, but this is, again, content where people can come in, and the goal for this content is to have it be curated in a place for faculty, but also have it so people can search based on what they're looking for. They're looking for good articles, they're looking for good books, or they're looking for technology. What are you looking for? And have it be curated and shared nationally as a faculty development model. And so there'll be more on that. I'm always happy to share. If you've got I've found that the best way is you tell me what your problem is, and I may have heard or read about a technology that can help you. But I hope you enjoyed the presentation on flipping the classroom. Yes. And I want to thank you all for letting me share my time with you.
Okay, well, thank you, James. It was another wonderful experience. I'm going to take a desktop back, and then I'm going to ask Larry Miller to talk about NISOD.
Yeah. Well, first I'd like to just commend James May for doing just an amazing job. And in fact, I look at this flipped classroom kind of stuff, and I look at Bloom's taxonomy, and I sort of see this convergence of Stephen Covey and Bloom in the sense of Covey would tell us to start with the end in mind. And really that creative part that was at the bottom of the flip pyramid is what everybody is so excited about right now, because James has really triggered a lot of affective stuff among all of us, and that's terrific. And I really appreciate that Stephen will be joining us at NISOD. NISOD is a membership organization. We are focused upon, but not exclusive to, community, technical, and junior colleges. We are part of the University of Texas College of Education, and our signature event is actually what we call the International Conference on Teaching and Leadership Excellence, but many of you may know that as the NISOD Conference. It'll be May 26th through the 29th here in Austin, Texas. You can find out information about the conference and about NISOD at www.nisod.org. And thank you again, James, just an awesome presentation. And Steve, thank you, and SoftChalk for really hitting a home run with all of these flipped classroom success stories. We at NISOD are just really, really proud of the work that you and SoftChalk are doing. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for the thank you. It's been a pleasure working with NISOD and both you and Becky on this series. And a reminder, they're all archived. Somebody asked about whether or not a flipped classroom would work in more of a more technical or scientific session. And our first in the series was about a chemistry course. So the person asked that question. Take a look at the archive of the chemistry course. We are recording this live right now, and in the next 24 hours it will be available on our website as well. And you'll get everybody will get an email letting you know that it is available and where it is. We are having a spring sale, so there's some special sales available right now through the end of this month, so contact our sales team if you want more information. And if you want more general information, and a lot of you asked about whether or not you need SoftChalk with an LMS, whether you can create this kind of content, was this created with SoftChalk or was that? come to our website. Get a 30-day free trial of SoftChalk Cloud. Come to our website for all kinds of learning materials, as you can see there. And of course, if you want more information specifically about the work being done by Dr. May, there is his email that will be included in the email you will get tomorrow. And if you want to know more about SoftChalk, you can send an email to learnmore@softchalk.com or just send an email to me, steve@softchalk.com. If you want some information about NISOD, both Larry and Becky will be monitoring info at nisod.org, so you can ask them about their conference. And